I'm going to take a few minutes to walk through the SVS Ultra Evolution Pinnacle Tower speaker, and I'll be honest right up front, there's a lot of buzz around flagship speakers, and that can make anyone wonder if they're paying for a name or actually getting something that will fit into a real-world listening room. The biggest hesitation most people have is wondering whether a high-end floor standing will really move the needle in a typical living room setup, or if it will just sit on a pedestal that never gets used because it's too big, too pricey, or just too demanding on the rest of the system. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks comparing a handful of SVS models, listening to a few reference speakers in a friend's home theater, and reading through what the community says about the brand's approach to time-aligned cabinets and driver integration, so let's see if the Pinnacle lives up to the hype, where it shines, and where it might be a mismatch. First, let's talk about the space you'll need. The Ultra Evolution Pinnacle isn't a compact bookshelf, it's a full-size tower with a glossy black finish that's meant to be a visual anchor in a room. If you have a dedicated media room or a larger living area where the speakers can sit a couple of feet away from the main listening spot, they'll have the breathing room to develop the depth that the dual opposing woofers are designed for. In a cramped apartment, you'll quickly notice that the low-frequency energy pushes against walls, causing a boomy, less controlled bass that can actually feel tiring after a while. So, the first practical strength is that the design really leans into a spacious environment where the acoustic alignment can do its job without being forced into a corner. What makes the Pinnacle stand out, beyond the eye-catching cabinet, is SV's acoustically centered time alignment architecture. In plain terms, the drivers, two 8-inch woofers positioned at the top and bottom of the cabinet, fire in a synchronized manner that aims to keep the wavefront arriving at your ear as coherent as possible. In a real-world listening test, that translates to a smoother transition from the deep bass up through the mid-range, especially on complex music passages where multiple instruments are playing simultaneously. I tried it with a classic big band recording, and the brass section stayed tight to the rhythm section without the usual muddy feeling you sometimes get from cheaper towers. That's a concrete strength you can hear, not just a spec on paper. The tweeter is another piece of the puzzle. SV coats the aluminum dome with a diamond-like layer, pushing the frequency response well beyond the typical 20 kHz ceiling for most home speakers. The practical upside? When you crank up a high-resolution piano track or a live orchestral recording, the sparkle on the highest strings doesn't sound harsh. Instead, it feels airy and detailed. For home theater use, that means explosions and high-frequency effects retain their edge without becoming shrill, which can be a real comfort during long movie marathons. Now, let's address the crossover. The Pinnacle uses a three-way design with premium components that blend the woofers and tweeter. In day-to-day use, that means you don't have to constantly fiddle with EQ settings to keep the bass from overwhelming the mids. The integration is seamless enough that you can drop a standard AV receiver into the mix, set the speaker size to large, and let the built-in crossover handle the rest. However, there's a hidden trade-off. The crossover is fairly fixed, so if you're the type of listener who likes to experiment with custom crossover points or wants to pair the towers with a subwoofer that handles the same low-end frequencies, you may find yourself needing an external crossover or DSP to fine-tune the blend. It's not a deal-breaker, but it's something to be aware of if you love tweaking. Who should consider buying the Pinnacle? If you're already invested in a higher-end AV receiver, have a room that can accommodate two large towers with a decent amount of clearance, and you appreciate music that demands a wide, coherent soundstage, think classical, jazz, or high-resolution streaming, this speaker will likely feel like an upgrade. It also works well for dedicated home theater setups where you want the front left and right channels to carry a significant portion of the cinematic impact, freeing a subwoofer to focus on the deepest rumbles without having to fill the entire bass spectrum alone. Who should skip it? First, anyone on a tight budget. Even though SV positions this as a flagship, the price point sits well into the premium tier, and you could probably get two solidly good mid-range towers and a subwoofer for less. Second, renters or people with very small rooms, the physical size and the need for proper placement make it a poor fit for cramped spaces. Third, audiophiles who insist on having the ability to dial in custom crossovers or who already own a set of speakers that they're happy with, the Pinnacle will sound great, but you may not get enough.